Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mitchell behind the camera. I'm from Same Old Radio Show. And now, to start things off, we are going to be talking about the importance of art and culture in society. Now, how to make it part of the fabric of community. Now, I'll start off with myself, Uncle Ken, and Auntie Cheryl. Now, I'm basically my culture would be, and I'm not talking about colonial culture. So I'm talking from my background, my culture as being where I grew up and how I grew up. Now, essentially, my culture would be Cebuano culture, which are the Visayan-speaking people. I grew up in the island called Mindanao, and from that island, in that area I grew up, is called Lanao, and it's predominantly the Maranao tribal area. And I know, Uncle Ken, that your Aboriginal name is Burgagutia,
Yes.
from the Bidjara people of northern, southwest Queensland.
Yeah.
And you, Auntie Cheryl,
My mother's mom came from the Ilocanja region. Originally, they came from North Norte, the Bucaneg.
the Bucaneg.
And they migrated to Cagayan Valley. And on my father's side, my father are Tagalog, but they intermarried with the Benjola, the Patriarca, and all those from Bicol. So we have the Tagalog and Bicolano mix.
All right.
Yeah.
My mix is a little bit more, has more kilometers than that. My grandmother is from Nueva Ecija, so I am part Ilocano, and then my father is Cebuano. So, just as a matter of interest for you, Uncle Ken, both of those are warring tribes, as in, those are strong with the tribal aspect, as in not so much territorial, but don't mess with those people. You treat them right and they will love you forever.
Yeah, and then some of my father's side, the Quejada, intermarried with Cebuanos also. And they all migrated from Davao City in Mindanao. So basically, we're from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao.
Yes,
so
yes.
My family hails from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Yeah.
Now, that's the beauty about what I want to put to people, that really a mix of different cultures, respect of other cultures, and all that is important in a visual sense, in an oral sense, in a martial sense. I know both of you are artists. You, Uncle Ken, are you write poems, and Auntie Cheryl, you do a lot of painting. Let's start with you, Uncle Ken. Now, on your poetry side.
Yeah, I write poetry and plays, so I do some playwriting as well.
Playwriting.
And short story. I'm doing a book of short stories at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So there's a few things, but poetry's been the main thing I've been noted for in writing. It's just starting to branch out in other things.
Okay, with your writing, so with your poetry, what are your topics?
A lot of my stuff, I have to admit, is very politically motivated.
Mm-hmm.
It's a strong, powerful political message against the oppressor. It's a celebration of our survival. It's also right about the love of our Mother Earth. So there are gentle cultural poems in there. There are poems in there about my respect for, we come from a matriarchal society, my respect for our women. But a lot is about the politics of being Aboriginal in this country. Also some of the trauma it causes. I write a lot of there's stuff in my poems about mental trauma, which I think, and you would understand coming from a people who've been colonised so many times. We've been colonised for 230 years, but the coloniser causes mental trauma, which people call mental health issues and things like this. but it's trauma from the coloniser. So, while doctors may have diagnosed me with some sort of illness they put a tag on, the only illness I ever suffered was trauma from the coloniser. Not being able to accept the coloniser's way. Still can't understand. My poetry reflects it. I don't understand it. It's bizarre.
I don't see that as bizarre, Uncle Ken, because I grew
I
up.
think they're bizarre.
Oh, they're
that's
bizarre. Oh, okay.
Because see, what they say is they call themselves civilised people,
I see what you mean now.
but they're not civilised. You know, when a coloniser comes into the country and into innocent people's countries, they do not carry on in a civilised manner. And so, when growing up hearing about civilisation and hearing how they educated people about my peoples and saying they came in, they didn't talk about invasion in the old days in education. They talked about teaching the uncivilised natives. Now, you know, you look years later at that term civilised, murdering, butchering and all sorts of atrocities at their heads, and that's civilisation, versus since the dawning of time we looked after this land and kept it pristine, and that's allegedly uncivilised. That's what I think is the bizarre thing about the whole debate of colonisation and the First Nations people. They had the hide to say this is civilisation. This is not. This is a long, long, long way from civilisation.
Well, that's what I mean about there's a merger of culture and there's an ignorance of culture. They thought that their culture was the only correct culture. You know, they thought that they were civilized.
We thought they were mad. There's plenty of oral history coming down from. The one thing about historians in this country is they refuse to acknowledge oral histories. But we have oral histories that have survived the last 230 years, and quite honestly, the first peoples to come in contact always thought the British were mad, and that there was something wrong, that they had some severe mental disturbances.
You touched on oral history in Mindanao and the Maranao people. There are also mainly oral history, and I'm not very familiar with your neck of the woods, Auntie Cheryl, but there would be something similar.
Yeah, there's plenty of oral histories too, but unfortunately, a lot of them are lost, you know, and some of them are described as fables, folk tales, you know.
Yeah, I don't like those terms.
That's how they are
they're not.
described,
No.
you know.
Fables is not.
And even our songs, you know, they say that they're just you know, they're not all true, you know.
Myths and legends.
Myths and legends,
Terrible.
but
That-
what?
It's our beliefs.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've discovered with other people. If they know nothing about it, they call it a myth.
myth.
But a lot of myths and so-called myths and legends come from history, and there is some truth to it.
Well, you know, in the history books I've read, people talk, noted historians talk about myths and legends. Now, this is where I feel really insulted because I'm not a Christian. But I don't call Christian beliefs myths and legends. That's their beliefs, and they have a right to believe that. And I'm not going to be that rude or that ignorant to call it somebody's inner belief, their core beliefs, a myth or a legend. Even if I could possibly pick holes in it, I wouldn't do that to that particular person. So while people can't understand what my beliefs are, I would ask them for the same courtesy. Don't use the term myths and legends for what I firmly believe in or what we firmly believe in. They're not myths and legends. They're our beliefs. They're our history. And they belong to us.
And there's also one thing that always concerns me is because in the Philippines we have a lot of different kind of indigenous people like the Maranaos, the Ilocanos, the Itneg, the Mangyans, so many, you know, even the Tausug, you know, all of them, you know. But in the historical account of some social anthropologists, they say that the first people are the Negritos or the Dumagats or the Aita or Itnig. And they are referred to as the indigenous. And then if you think about, well, what about the other, like the
That's right.
Maranaos, the Ilocano? Where did the Ilocano came from? Where did the Tagalog came from?
That's right.
Where did in Bisaya, there's a lot of tribal
There's a
and
lot of tribes. Yeah.
tribes there, different kinds of group, and in Mindanao too, and even in my mother's homeland, the Ilocanja, they they have different kinds of people, like the Itnig. Itnig are different, but they're side by side living together, which Ken was telling me their clan groups, and I said exactly, Ken. So when they say that the Negrito or the first people, they're the indigenous, and some people are saying, you're not indigenous, and then when I look at myself, or what I am.
Yes. Now that's where I think culture.
Well, that's identity theft.
Yes, it's
I had this
very
discussion.
important.
I had this discussion many years ago with the scientific community here in New South Wales. They actually wrote a retraction for the Sydney Morning Herald in 1993 because I wrote them a letter and said they kept propagating this thing that we had Negritos here. The first wave of people goes in order. Negritos came first, then the Carpentarians, and they forced the Negritos further south. And then the ANU, who were indigenous to Japan, they were the third wave. They forced the other two further south. Now, when you look all around the country, I pointed out to them, if you go into any tribal area and ask their history, they'll start since the dawning of time, and we have our own histories of our own creation. As if firstly, what you're doing is you're taking away our beliefs by imposing this belief that you cannot prove. So the thing is, you cannot prove it, but the most dangerous point by perpetrating this, what we call your version of our beginnings, you're justifying what happened in 1788, because anybody now can say, why are you worried about 1788 when the Negritos came here first, then the Carpentarians invaded them and forced them into other parts of the country. So you're actually, by your misinformation, are justifying the invasion of 1788. They actually wrote a retraction in the Sydney Morning Herald and apologised to Aboriginal peoples. And they've laid off a bit since then because, and I would dare say the same thing is happening anywhere where you have Indigenous peoples. Wherever I've met people from other countries, their beginning stories always start with since the dawning of time. They don't talk about an invasion or a migration or anything like this. That's a Western concept. I think because they invaded everywhere, they had to invent a narrative where we also invaded each other. And so it's a Western narrative. It's a colonial narrative that really doesn't fit in with our own view of ourselves. And whether they want to believe whatever, they should at least have the decency to go away and leave us in peace to have our belief.
That's right.
Now you mentioned one group of people coming in, and I can speak about Mindanao because I studied a little bit about how people now, like say the Tiboli and the Maranaos, ended up in the mountains. It's because they don't really want to. Well, war is a terrible thing, and it doesn't end on the day that it ends. It keeps going. Say, for example, in the Middle East, you've got Syria, for example, where bombs laid 20 years ago are still there and people are still being hurt. Now, in Mindanao, just to shorten the story, is that when the Muslim invasion, we would call it, started, the tribal people did not want anything to do with it, so they went up the mountains. When the Spaniards came, they went further up the mountains.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing
Yeah.
around where there are hills and mountains, because that's the only place that you could go.
Yeah, like in.
But it's taking away your belief of, it's taking away your own belief of how people came to the mountains.
That's right.
They're imposing a version of events that suits them.
Yeah, like in my
exactly.
father's hometown in Sariaya, that's in Quezon province. The historical society wrote a story, and it says that once upon a time that place was inhabited by native people, but when the Spaniards came, the native people retreated to the mountains. And
That's
I,
what they said about us.
and I told
Yeah.
myself, I said, these people are really crazy. What? I mean,
It's the same
just
story.
came and then they just
Yeah.
go. It's not it. That's why they said there's no native people there anymore. And when I look at my family, what are we?
Well, who are we?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
It's
are
exactly the same
we? Who we
story.
are?
We were taught at school when the British came, we moved further inland.
Yeah, it's always going to the
Nothing
mountain.
about us protecting our land and
Yeah.
warriors.
It's
Yeah.
like we just accept
Women,
it,
women warriors, nothing about that. It's like, like
Yeah.
Cheryl says, it's like we just accepted and went somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's so
You
ridiculous.
came and then okay.
Yeah.
here,
What about
every-
the brave people who resisted?
Yeah, no.
But even my understanding of Filipino history, even when the Spanish were repelled, Bonifacio and his group had a lot to do with repelling the Spanish. The Mindanao people never ever gave up.
No.
They were the people who never ever accepted or
Yeah,
well,
look at
That's
Lapu-Lapu.
right.
never
Unity.
defeated.
Unity.
But in the narrative of getting rid of the Spanish, the Spanish have written Rizal was responsible for throwing the Spanish out. Rizal, in my understanding, was an academic. He wrote a lot about resistance. Bonifacio was the warrior who came down from the mountains.
This is what I'm talking about.
And-
Where how art,
Well-
visual arts, oral art,
Well,
and
it
martial art.
suits the invader more to have an academic
Yeah.
overthrow them than a group from the mountains of warriors overthrow them. And by even in defeat, the Spanish have sort of put their own spin of history on it to have an academic
But this
responsible rather
this
than
is
a
the
warrior.
biggest injustice of all. Forget about Bonifacio, the first people or the first person group of people who who thwarted the invasion was Lapu-Lapu. And he's not
Yeah.
even Lapu-Lapu.
He's not
They
even mentioned.
They
No.
bastardized his name,
Yes.
calling him after a fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see the way they
Yeah.
they bastardize him, and he is not even mentioned in the history as if he didn't exist.
Well, he killed
You know,
Magellan
yeah,
not
that's
murder,
good.
as
And-
an act of self-defense.
Yeah, I
As
know.
an act of self-defense, do you know that those people, actually I'm talking about the Spaniards, to rile those natives up on that island, they started burning the houses
Yeah.
in the hope of getting them more angry and losing, but it backfired on them,
Well,
unfortunately.
Magellan got it as an act of self-defense, but
Yeah.
but then they bastardised the man's name, and he doesn't appear in history
Yeah.
as he's a very important figure in history. One of the key invaders was Magellan. Well, they rile him up, and the key invader got done over.
This is what I really appreciate between you two, because here are two, a Filipino and an Australian Aboriginal culture, but yet here we are, we can sit and talk about the similarities
Very
of
similar, yeah.
very, very similar instances of, well, not so much history in time, but the movements are very
Well, it's
similar.
also there's a similar thing I saw when I was living in the Philippines and talking to people, particularly people with a good political background. Part of the invasion is to demonise the people.
Yeah.
And I was there for 2 years, and you hear the coloniser talking about Filipinos being lazy, Filipinos being this, Filipinos being that. Now, my son, he's having a bit of a rest now, but he was only 16 and he was over there for 6 months. He said, I've never seen such hard-working people in all my life. I've never seen such a dedicated people in all my life.
Just for a pig.
And just to get a meal, and it changed his life. He was in this country going through his own turmoils. He came back. He went back into studies. He refused to accept help. And he said, no, I'm never going to complain again. He's 24 now, and he's one of the nicest young human beings you ever want to meet. But the Philippines had a lot to do with that. But because he saw the pride and dignity people carried themselves with. These were people that people would demonise and say were lazy. And I'm living over there and I'm not seeing anybody lazy. I'm seeing people who've been demonised as lazy. Also, the other thing, as they said about us, we're all dirty, I mean, I went into a lot of households in the Philippines. You could eat off the floor in any one of them. Any single one of them. I went into, this country's a shame when you've got fast food restaurants. You can't go in because it's not a clean table. You don't find that in the Philippines. It's actually very much a shame for Filipino people to have something in their restaurant even slightly dirty. So this whole myth of demonising, we were subjected to that. We're all violent. All Aboriginal people are alcoholics. In actual fact, if you look at statistically, there's less alcoholics in Aboriginal communities and Aboriginal peoples per head of population than there is in the rest of the country. So, and if you look statistically, we're the highest unemployed, but that's because of racism. But as far as doing courses and education to better ourselves, we far outstrip non-Aboriginal people for the ability to try and get ahead. We're always doing something to try and get ahead, and we're written off as being lazy.
As usual, the news does not tell the truth.
Well, the news is not telling the truth now, even in the Philippines. It's not telling the truth here.
No.
We're looking at here now. We call the lucky country. This is not a lucky country. We've got the highest rates of deaths in custody per head of population. We've got a prime minister who's so unaware of that, yet he can get on the global stage and look like a really good human being because he's white and colonial. Duterte gets demonised by the global stage because he's anti-colonial.
Yeah.
And he gets demonised. This is where things really infuriate me. We have a leader who's a fascist. This country is fastly becoming a fascist nation. But towards First Nations people, it's been one of the most racist countries that have been invaded in the history of mankind. But this news does not get out of this country. And we've had subsequent governments who on the world stage come up looking squeaky clean. They're all wading knee deep in the blood of First Nations peoples, but they all smile on the world stage as and the world looks at them as very decent people. Yet here on the other side, we've got somebody who's helping the poor, getting free health, getting free education, getting employment, getting rid of corruption in the Philippines, and he's demonised by the media because he took over from a president that was running a narco politics regime. He took over from that, so anything evil happening was coming from the other side. But you got to, because he's anti-US, he gets the press giving it to him. Yet when I live in the Philippines, almost 90% of people love him. You can't, and it's amazing the difference. I come back to this country. I'm very critical on this country. We have leftists out here who say, you can't believe anything you read in the media. You can't believe anything you read. That's their mantra. As soon as they read stuff about Duterte, they start saying, because I know I lived in the Philippines, they start saying to me, oh, what about that? And they start believing everything they read in the media. And I say to them, you're hypocrites. You can't believe what you read in the media, yet you're telling me what you're reading in the media is true. You can't have it both ways. And this is what my criticism of the left in this country. They have attacked, our own left has attacked Duterte without any substance. Because what they haven't done is been on the ground over there.
Well, the problem is when you're a textbook academics and textbook activists, that's the result, Yeah,
I have a similar saying: beware the one book scholars.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, there's another saying I've got.
No, there's a saying. Yeah. I remember that. It's like in the Philippines, they say, oh, he just read one book and then he's an expert on everything. It's a similar thing, right?
Yeah.
No, we've got there's one I find funny. You're either an activist or a yaktivist. You just yak about it. Yak. That's what you do. Talk.
And
Keyboard warrior.
And the thing is, they like to theorize everything. I said, seriously? Theory is good. But when you apply it in, in real life, those theory doesn't work,
Look,
No.
It's different in the real world,
in an indigenous situation anywhere in the world, you look at all the theory that's coming out of university, they're from a colonial mindset, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah.
And so those theories don't always, some of them are helpful, could be helpful in analysing a colonial situation, an invader situation, could be helpful, but they don't completely, they don't complete the narrative of what is left from when you've been, a couple of hundred years later. They don't have any answers. They don't provide the answers, and they're certainly not on the ground there. They're not at the cold face of where oppression lies. So the theorists and all that, as nice as they can write, can never nail the colonial and the invader and people who's invaders relationship. They can never nail that because they come from the invader
Perspective.
Well, they belong to that society, so therefore their thinking they've been brought up under that colonial mentality. It affects their writing. I tried to tell people this at university, and they treated me like I was some sort of he-devil. And so, it was just ridiculous the way they carried on when I criticised their precious theorists.
Yeah. What we've just spoken about is the result of colonialization, the loss of identity, the loss of culture. But how do we say, other than Auntie Cheryl and Uncle Ken, you on the art side now, how do we remind people to look into their culture to find themselves again?
Well, like my art, what I do is I try to incorporate in my modern work some of our traditional designs, like the in the Philippines, prior to invasion, we are known as what you call this? We like to put marks on our tattoo, and it's a sign of, for men it's a sign of bravery, and for women it's a sign of how beautiful you are, or how strong you are as a woman. It's a form of it's a form of artwork, and when invasion came, those things were outlawed because and on Christianism you're not allowed to put what you call this, to make your body pristine and everything. And they even started putting clothes on us. And imagine in the Philippines, back in the days, it's a warm climate, so naturally we use we're scantily clad,
Yeah.
or but in some areas like in Baguio, there are some areas in the Philippines that it's cold also, but they use a considerably thin material, but not really fully clothed up to here. When the Spaniards came, they started doing all those funny things to us. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to revive those things, and put it on my art. Like one of my art, there's a subtle hint there that I put one traditional designs, and I use also from remembering colors from my country, the beautiful greens, the beautiful,
Would you have that
everything.
artwork here now?
Yeah.
Okay, Okay, and we're back now. This is Say More radio show now. I named this radio program Say More because I want to encourage people independent to say more, not only through talking but through art. So painting, poetry, and music, and music has a lot of messages, even Aboriginal music without words. Yeah, everything. Now let's focus on Auntie Cheryl's work here. Now, just behind you, what's this painting about?
This, I call this the non-biblical woman. It's non-gender, That's why it's a womb
Woman,
hyphenated
W
man.
hyphenated
Yeah,
M-A-N.
yeah. So, yeah, it's like it's the birthing of humanity, because I believe that it is a non-gender personal crucial to an evolving identity belonging to the past. The implement carried here, if you notice, this is the bolo. You remember?
Yes, yes.
That's our traditional bolo.
Mm-hmm.
It is carried, this is used in our country as to toil the land. Yeah, means to toil the land, to dig. And this is, that's a traditional design. Yeah. And this is like a gold. It's like this is a signal to signifies that in any invasion or any thing that we are ready to use this. Yeah. So I'm trying to say that we are peaceful people, man or woman, and we just want to look after the land. But in case of anything that wants to ruin that, we are going to
defend.
Yeah.
Now, incidentally, sorry, I'll just.
I think it's interesting with the colours here. This is only my seeing. They're very much colours of the earth.
Yeah.
So where I look at when I first saw this painting, you haven't got a sky behind this painting. You haven't got trees or a mountain. But you've got these earth colours.
Yeah.
So this person and the earth are all one identity.
Yeah.
They're merged together.
Yeah.
So repelling the invader is also repelling from the Mother Earth, the protector, the holder of Mother Earth.
That's why it's like that. And if you notice, all my paintings are
earth tones. Yeah.
Because that's because I believe that I don't use color wheel. What I do is I believe that every individual has their own color wheel. So I just follow my I mix my own colors and everything, and whatever comes out, that's it. So, and this one, I call this, these two are twins. I call this merging complexities. This is done in oil, and this is called, this is explained as, this is the first people or indigenous people's never-ending struggle to teach, to display the simplicity of being at one with our world. And if you see, this is a tree trunk, and that's a leaf, and that's a base, but it's painted, right? It signifies that in the old days, Filipinos like to paint their, themselves. And then this is, this is brick. It's like a house, a brick, and this is an indigenous design. It's saying that whatever happens, the nature or the
Natural environment.
The natural environment will prevail.
Will prevail.
Will rise up.
Yes, that's very evident where people maybe in South America, well, the Incas and all that, they're suddenly discovering lost civilizations because Mother Nature has overcome it again. Covered it up.
This is it. Yeah. And if you notice, it's a man. Yeah. But that's a woman again. See, did you see that? This is a face of a man, but in his psyche is a woman. So it's all about the Mother Nature again.
Well, pretty much in Asian culture, that's the yin and the yang.
Yeah. So unconsciously, I'm trying to that's the one that's resurfacing my
Yeah.
And this, the next one is his twin, or they're twins, and I call these unique complexities. This painting is a continuum of this painting, merging complexities. If you notice, there's a thumbprint, and this represents our DNA, and it is sitting on a tree trunk. or a pot. And the question is, in relation to merging complexities, which path are we taking?
Or which
So-
branch of the tree?
Yeah, which branch of the trees are we going to take?
Now, incidentally, you mentioned DNA, the thumbprint of DNA.
Yeah.
Now, I had my DNA done recently to try and figure out my face. So I've basically, I've basically got a European face, the build of a Pacific Islander, and and as it turned out, I am 49% East Asian and something like 20% Pacific Islander,
Right.
and something like 12 to 15% European from the Iberian Peninsula. So that's a very interesting painting,
Yeah.
because from that we were talking about culture. So from this, now if we could identify ourselves, which is the fingerprint,
Yeah.
we would then know which way to go.
Yeah.
But
that's
then
it.
again, not only knowing which way to go, but we will have an option of which path to follow.
Yeah, that's why it's like that.
But then again, it leads to identity.
Well, I
Yes,
see this
yes.
whole thing of when you're talking about DNA, you know, people look at us as, I'm obviously mixed
Heritage.
heritage, but, you know, people don't realise that they look at Aboriginal people up north and on the west coast of Western Australia, and they say, you know, they're obviously not all Aborigine. But before 1788, we were trading with people from all over Asia.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
And we have oral histories of people from the Philippines coming to this country, people from all the Asian Pacific region coming to this country. The only difference is between them and the British. They came and traded culture, language, goods, and there were intermarriages, and then they left. And then, so some people who were intermarried stayed here, but and the Macassans, a late friend of mine was up at the Macassan Islands and had, you know, oral histories, people who knew their history from this country, who had been born and bred for generations in the Macassans, but they knew their oral histories from here, and he recorded it. Now, that since then, you know, we've seen documentaries where people have researched this, and this whole thing of trade also caused intermarriages. So I remember Torres Strait Islander, a friend of mine taught me a traditional Torres Strait Islander song. One day I was singing in the kitchen and Cheryl said, "Where did you get that from?" From? I said, "It's a tradition. It's traditional to Torres Strait Island." She said, "No, that's a traditional Filipino song." Same song.
The monkey and the turtle.
Same song.
Same song.
And so, you know, this whole thing of when people say who came from where or whatever, there's always been trading and intermarriage
Yeah.
within all indigenous cultures. The difference is we had respect for each other.
Yes.
And so when people came from Asian countries to trade, they came exactly for that.
Yeah.
And if there were marriages took place, they were taking place with everybody's goodwill, and people went to live there, or some people stayed here. But the British seem to think they were the first people here. I mean that came to this country outside Aboriginal people, but they're the first ones that came and invaded the country.
Yeah.
They're the first ones that came and started killing people.
Yeah. They came to take, not to trade.
So,
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of interaction, you know. And so,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing with the Chinese in the Philippines. You know, they came just to trade, but they never stayed. They just interchanged with our goods and services. You
Well,
know,
people probably travelled the ocean and they did their trading and ceremonies and things like this, and then they would get homesick, so I want to go home.
yeah, they want to go home. Or some of them stayed because they got
Because you've got to remember,
fall in love with a Filipino woman or some indigenous
they
woman,
stay
and then that's it.
because of love. But if you look at culture, the way indigenous life was, any natives people, you know, the lifestyle was so beautiful. But look what the English, they were coming away from rat holes of London. There were disease-ridden cultures, not even culture, disease-ridden societies that were eating each other alive with their classism, with how they treated each other. It was very mongrelized society that they came. So they had to invade other places, and that's all they knew. They only knew brutality. And there were convicts who were forced out here, but when they were given a choice whether they go back home, they stayed here.
They stayed.
Because why would they go back to a place where they were full of disease and full of immoral behaviour? Historians often write, and anthropologists often write about Indigenous peoples, and they make up the stories we were immoral. Oral history tells us that the people around the Sydney Basin area were shocked at the immorality that was happening and the behaviour of men and women together publicly that was happening. They were shocked to the core. They'd never seen anything like this. So, these people cannot talk about immoral behaviour when they talk about any Indigenous peoples anywhere in the world. If you look, there was I'm trying to think of the lady's name. She wrote a famous book about the Polynesian women. And she talked about the erotic side of the Polynesian women and
the hula dance
and how they were very sexualized.
The Western world sexualized that.
Some 60 years later, those women were old women, and they came out with the truth. She was a famous anthropologist. Anyway, they came out with the truth. And they said, "Look, she came here with an idea of who we were. She came here with her colonial idea that because of our climate, we didn't overclothe ourselves because that's going in hand with nature. So she had this idea that we were sexualised women. Now we wanted to move on, so we just sat down and told her what she wanted. But we didn't realise she was going to write a whole book that was going to be studied by people all over the world. And had we known that, we wouldn't have told her. But this whole thing of they were erotic, they were sexually
explicit,
immoral, and just going from partner to partner, and it was almost like the young girls, just as soon as they reached puberty, just went out with anybody. And that's how she wrote it. But they came clean. They said, we just told her. Actually, we lived under very strict laws of relationships, which all Indigenous peoples did. But this text was taken as gospel and studied by people about Polynesian people. So therefore, when people came in contact with Polynesian women, they tried to force themselves on them because
they thought they were easy.
But the opposite was the case. They had very strict laws governing the relationship between men and women, which all Indigenous peoples had. The people who didn't have strict laws were the British and Spanish and people like that who came and, it was anything goes with it. And that's what we couldn't get over, when even where I come from, southwest Queensland, the oral histories from there was people were disgusted at their behaviour. Even under their own history, if you look at in the first part of the 1800s, there was a commission of inquiry held in Adelaide about relationships between Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people. There was a minister down there who had built a good rapport with people because he was a good man. He was able to go in and out of tribal lands. He was called before the commission, and the judge asked him, what do the natives think of us? And he looked at the judge, he said, they think we're stupid. He said, they think we're stupid. And he said, how do you gather that? And he said, because of the way we live. And then he just went to list off all these things. And the judge was shocked. He was shocked because up until then, they were saying these are the uncivilized people, and they were saying the natives were stupid. But this man of the cloth, one of their own men, he just turned it all on his head, and it made perfect sense. The way they lived. And native people just thought they were stupid. They said, we've watched them chop trees down.
Still happening now.
Use the wood to build a house, and inside the wooden house, put a fireplace, and then the house burns down. And native people thought that's pretty weird. Get all that place just to burn it down.
Look at me, I never studied art, or I just want to pick up a brush and that's it. Look, because I have native blood, it's easy for me to do things, because we have what we call common sense. And like when we wanted to look at our fishermen, they don't use compass,
Mm-hmm.
this and that.
Mm-hmm.
But they know by just doing
Instinctively.
this instinctively.
They
They
know.
put their
Mm.
hands and they know which
Mhm.
direction is the air is,
Mhm.
and they know by just studying the stars.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know when if there's going to be a lot of fish in the ocean today, or everything. They know those
They
things.
didn't waste energy. If they knew there was going to be no fish out there, they had something else.
Yeah,
Yes.
like it's funny too because I have a friend who married a Danish man, and his husband wanted to get power tools and everything. And you know what my friend said? We don't need that. You just get a stone, and then there's these nails, and then you make poke poke. That's
Yeah.
it. You make on the wall. That's it. Why do you need all those things?
Yeah.
Well,
It's,
that's the knowledge that they have as compared to traditional knowledge.
But if you look at
Yeah.
art and the politics of art, the thing I like about when we look at this artwork, Cheryl's using traditional designs, but it's done in a more contemporary
Mhm.
setting,
Mhm.
more contemporary style, because she's not going all traditional.
Mhm.
But the second a person who has come from a country that's colonised starts producing
Mhm.
art that has images of human existence, images of being at one with nature, that's a political statement.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Whether people want to interpret it that way or not, I think if they can't even see that, they're very misguided.
Mhm.
You have designs that are traditional to the Philippines.
Mhm.
We don't know if that's the exact design, but it's inspired from something that's as old as the beginning of time.
Mhm. Mhm.
So here it is, all these years after the 1500s you were first colonised, all these years later, there's surviving within her psychic this narrative that comes from pre-colonisation. That's a political statement. That's saying no matter what you've done, no matter in these years since the 1500s, no matter what you've done,
It's still
within
there.
me still lives
Yeah.
what was
Yes.
there before.
Now you mentioned the political side, not exactly the political side of the painting, but I'm channeling my Greek side. So I've got 12 Italo-Greek background. Now, because of the influence of movies like 300,
Yeah.
now I'm looking at that painting from here and I can see the shield, I can see the sword, and I can see the helmet from up there. Now, what comes to mind was that, because keeping in mind that we're talking about culture and how to protect it. Now, if we believed what that movie was saying about history from that time, a question was asked, now, why don't you have walls like big cities? So why do you need walls when the men, the people of the city, are the guardians of the city?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
in native culture, men and women
That's
fought. I mean, I saw a photo recently that Cheryl showed me of a woman, and Cheryl will know her name,
That's Remedios.
who fought against.
Commander
She
Luwayway.
was a commander who fought against the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, and wouldn't go into battle without a lipstick on.
Or dress.
And nicely dressed, but
Yeah.
took away the whole image of a woman who's a commander. But she was a woman who was
Yeah.
leading. She was a commander. She was leading resistance. So, we all indigenous cultures have oral history of women standing up and fighting as well.
Yes, in Visayas, particularly the Leyte region. I can't remember her name right now, but she was a Waray, and Waray women are known to be very
fierce warrior.
warrior. People are you marrying a Waray? You're
Yeah.
strong. You have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, brace yourself.
Yeah, brace yourself.
Yeah. So I believe people that, well, it's I guess again it's a cultural thing. Now it has to be a strong man to be able to not so much comply, but to to be able to work with a strong complement. Yeah.
If you have,
Which is what I see with you two.
Well, if you
So
have a
there's the
strong
art,
matriarch,
there's the
if you have a strong matriarch,
yeah,
number one, you've got to be able to accept that fact.
yeah.
she's a strong matriarch. I come from a matriarchal society, so it's no threat to me. The simple matter is we listen to our women, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's not, and I'm used to, you know, having strong Aboriginal women around, and they would tell you things that were so profound, and they would give you a lot of strength.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of complementing each other. I think what the West has missed out on when they deal with I often hear people talking about Western feminism. You know, look, we had leaders way before the British came here. We had women warriors when the British came here. We had women elders. You know, we had matriarchal societies. One of the problems here and in any place is when the invaders came, as in your country, the Spanish here, the British, they were patriarchal societies. So everything written was from the patriarch. So even us, when they talked about our warriors, and we're proud of our warriors, but they only mentioned the men.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
Because they were patriarchal, so they only took notice of the men.
Yeah.
And
No balance.
they have no idea of balance, but we have a pride in our history that our women were warriors and strong, fierce warriors, and you know, people to be respected within our own group before the British, people to be respected. So it's not an issue with me saying, you know, I'm the man, I've got to dominate the house. That's a Western concept. And you know, it's pretty easy for me to see if I'm saying the wrong thing. If she gets a bit fiery, I start thinking this could lead to, you know, I mightn't come out of this too well. I better back off, you know. So it's you know.
Well, that's the balance. I think that's a very good example of makes you think twice about what you're saying. Makes men think.
Well, all married women do.
It's funny, like I said in my previous statement, you know, that I am a feminist and I believe in feminism, in women, you know, in women empowerment, but I don't believe in women domination or dominating man, because seriously, we came from both sexes, you know. We are a combination of a man and a woman. So we're a she man, we're a she man, or he or who or she.
Which is the theme of that first painting.
Yeah. We are like that. And believe it or not, a lot of my paintings are inspired by men, but it's a woman's painting. But everything about it is all about a woman.
Tell us about this one with the green theme on it. For me, I can see an eye there. For me, it's vision.
Yeah. Actually, it is a seed, but you can call it an eye also, because you know a seed it came from this seed. You notice the seed is what do you call that? What do you call it?
Shooting, sprouting.
Sprouting.
Yes.
So it's sprouting in tree, you know. So the thing is, actually, this was inspired by my husband. This is how I see my husband, you know. I see him as a person who is questioning all the time, and you know, he has that through his eyes. You can see his wisdom, his wisdom that passed on by, you know, his DNA, his, you know, his psyche and everything. And if you see here that it's like a laughter, you know, that laughter is, you know, because the laughter is like his survival against this complex world, you know. And you see that's a leaf, because Ken is a nature conservationist, you know, and that is like a shape of the
the eyebrow.
The eyebrow.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, it's like wisdom, you know, intelligence, you know, intellect, you know, stuff like that. And it's, you know, the color is also very earth tone, which is coming back to nature again. I can't help it, you know, because I'm indigenous. I need to, you know, That's the color that comes out from me. Nature.
So even though that doesn't have traditional designs in it, the inspiration of it comes from a traditional point of view. This is how she sees me, her partner, and you know, probably a better look than my face has anyway. But yeah, the whole thing of the eye, but she sees that leaf there, and I was very honoured when she said, because even though you're fighting for justice, the underlying narrative is you're fighting for your Mother Earth, and you're fighting for the conservation of it, because our people are children of the Mother Earth. You must say that people, they're her children. So, you know, I say to conservationists, I don't know why you go and study conservation when you've got First Nations people here and we're born with conservation in our DNA.
That's why
do you have to do a doctorate in it? And so that leaf sort of symbolises that to me, is that always in there is that thing of I don't have to go and study how to love and care for the earth. It's always there. And I question sometimes, I saw the eyebrow more as questioning, I question sometimes why people have to go and do a professorship in how to look after the earth. Why don't they just sit around the campfire and ask the people who've been here since the dawning of time, who always looked after the earth before the invader came? And the answers are already there, but the most obvious answer for the conservationists and even governments trying to now deal with environmental disasters, they're bypassing the very people who always had the answers.
It always had the answer. I've always been of the belief that knowledge of anything, there is nothing under the sun that is unknown. The problem is we are not asking the questions, and we are not, asking the right people, or looking in the right place.
That's right. And I do believe also, that's why I did that you know, what's the point of, you know, preserving the environment if there's no one to preserve the environment, right?
If you kill off all the first peoples.
So, you know, I said, what's the point? We might as well, you know, blow ourselves, you know, if that's what we want, right?
Now, before we actually wrap this very beautiful conversation up, now we've been, we sort of, in the beginning, we started talking about sharing time and culture, and what is time and what is culture. And so, again, thank you for the time you spent. And for me, this is a very good cultural exchange, not so much for the marriage, but also for the exchange of information.
Well, when you look at time, something that's said to us when we're very young, it's always said to us. It's a different concept of time. And it's funny, I found a t-shirt in the Philippines that said yesterday, today, tomorrow. So I got it straight away, because we were always taught yesterday, today, tomorrow is all one thing. That's our concept of time. It's all one thing. Now when you're little, you sort of think, what's that all about, you know? You think, well, yesterday's gone. And today and tomorrow, you know, I don't know what tomorrow is. But when you get older and you look around, that's the perfect sense of time. The perfect sense of time is all one, because what happened yesterday is dictating what you're doing now, which dictates what you do tomorrow. So it's all one entity. And when people say, they particularly say to Aboriginal people, you've got to get over what happened 230 years ago, the invasion. We can't.
It's a connection.
The ongoing trauma and the ongoing invasion, the colonial mentality is still here. So there's a direct link.
There hasn't been a break.
There's never been a break. And so yesterday and today are the same. Now, unless we change, tomorrow will be identical. But even tomorrow there'll be similarities. The same thing of yesterday, today, tomorrow is in dramatic stages of invasion. It stays the same because you're still being invaded. But even if you're not invaded, yesterday how you looked after and behaved yesterday refers to how your survival today. And your survival today dictates the continuum of your culture tomorrow. And even under invasion, how we act now ensures the continuum of our culture into the future. So even though colonials are here, they cannot dictate our yesterday, today, tomorrow, because it's all one. They can never rob that from us.
Yeah, now I'd just like to point out to whoever ends up watching this video, and I know there will be a few people watching this video, I'd like to point out that what Uncle Ken is talking about here does not only apply to the Aboriginal culture, it applies to everyone,
Of course it does. I mean,
to every country.
I think even prior to colonials evolving into invaders, I think even they came from a culture where they had the same thing. They just lost the way somewhere. They really lost the plot somewhere.
Yeah, now talking about loss of ways, now behind you there, Auntie Cheryl, all we can see, well, all I can see there are lines. Now, are they some sort of direction that you have painted, that you have channeled?
Well, if you can see, that's a moon.
Oh,
And it's and it's a fetus. It's all about a woman again. And if you can see, it's like a lizard-like. Yeah, there's a lot of images. And this is I'm trying to provoke my audience in thinking, in questioning the the belief in God and the belief in the Darwinian evolution. That's what I'm trying to achieve here. Yeah.
Well, there's a never-ending argument between evolutionists
and
and God.
Yeah.
This is
That's how I.
the evolutionists will say we came from primordial pool and creatures, so that's a lizard-like thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the birthing, is more in line with God. So there's
Just for myself, looking at embryos and all that. Now, when you mentioned lizard-like, now if you look at all the embryos of all mammals at one point or another, they all look like lizards.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I don't know. It's just I'm like that. I don't know where I get all these funny stuffs. I don't even.
Like you're channeling the universe. That's what I can see. Channeling the earth.
Channeling the
that's
earth.
one of my favourites. That one because it's about birthing.
And even the way what you call this how do you say it in English? The ripples.
The strokes.
The fluid. I can see the fluidity of. In a womb, there's always this fluid.
Yeah. That's right.
See, in our dreaming stories, when you look at it, it's just looking at a thing of Darwinian versus God. But when I look at that from an indigenous point of view, we believe we came from Mother Earth, the animals and people. So we have totems that are animals and we are one with them. So this may have an animal-like look, but it's also humanistic because we came from that animal. So this to me is very cultural and very significant to culture, but it's birthing. It's birthing of both the animal world and the people world merging together.
But that's my interpretation. But when I create my painting, I'm trying to I'm trying to provoke my audience to think and analyze, because that might be my opinion, but I don't know what they're,
Some of us might have a different one.
Yeah.
Because it depends on how you see things,
Perspective. Yes. Some people could see that a different way at a different angle.
Well, I just had a different perspective.
But for me, that's
reading.
That's what I'm trying to achieve. It's not. That's just like when I said, when I try to create something, it's not for me. It's for my audience,
With perspectives, the one thing we have, and you just saw then, Cheryl had a perspective, I had a different one. And as a writer, Cheryl will read something that I've read where I'm seeing one thing, she sees other things. We don't argue over it, we accept the fact that you have a different interpretation. I'll write something, she's the first one that hears it. And she says, that really goes like this, and that's not what I'm meaning to write. But, we're both mature enough to realise that whatever you see and what you're portraying, somebody else will see it differently because
Yeah.
they are somebody else.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, you know.
It may or may not be a cultural perspective. Nevertheless, if we learn to respect the other person's perspective, we could learn from each other.
I remember
that's
years
right.
ago I was doing with people who'd studied literature, I was doing a reading and they were to take notes and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other artists there and they were answering questions about their own literature. And I think they got quite miffed when I was asked questions. I said, I really don't know. I just write things and put it aside and I'll leave you to interpret it. That's your job. I'm just writing. And I wasn't being smart. I was actually feeling that at that time. I had written a whole lot of stuff at the time that I hadn't really reread. I'd just written it. And so that was the stuff I chose to read out. And then I said, I'm not over familiar with this word. So I was being very honest. So where somebody else was giving a massive interpretation to their work, I was saying, and then I pointed to the audience, I said, gee, you and you've all just heard this poem. I would expect each of you to have a different viewpoint and different images evoking in your head from what I just read out. But that's fine with me. Every viewpoint you'll have is very valid with me.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna, if you tell me something, I'm not gonna say, no, that's wrong.
Yes.
Because I do have some sort of sense of idea of what I want to say, but that's me having a sense. But your receptor is very different
Yes.
to mine. So I've never insulted, and I actually can't overanalyze my own work because I actually think that's up to to you as the audience to get something from it. Yeah.
Yep. Now what have we got here, Auntie Cheryl?
This is what I call the forest woman. This was inspired by what do you call this? A very spiritual man. Raymond Babligado. And I call this forest woman. A woman is considered, the provides nourishment. She's a nurturer. Remember? She's the she provides for life. And not only that she provides nourishment, she provides wisdom. And as you can see, there's she's in the forest again.
There's a man.
Yeah, but
There's a man.
There's a man there again. Yeah. See, so it's saying that us woman could not get away, without that. It's always they complement each other. That emergence, it's always there. That's why we could not get away from the thing that women must be the one who's up above everyone. Should always be join together and bind together. They should be complement all the time.
This is what astounds me with the concept of God being male.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that's the perfect concept of God in the Western sense.
I mean, if you believe in God, God should be neutral if anything.
Neutral, yes.
Or maybe twins.
Yeah.
Because I this whole thing of, and I don't like to knock religion. People call our stuff myths and legends, but when people call my beliefs myths and legends, I have to question, well, how on earth did you make a woman from a rib?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to go too far into that because I don't really want to knock people's beliefs.
Yes.
But I only make it a point to say,
question your own.
Have a look at what you firmly believe in.
Yeah.
And I respect that, and I'm going to let you believe it. I can't stop it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to stop it neither.
Yeah.
I have no desire to stop anybody's belief.
Yeah.
But before you start using the terms myths and legends, have a look at some of the things that other people might see as a little bit odd.
Yeah.
I think that's it for me. This one is not, this.
I love this one. It's so mysterious. I see.
Really?
Yes. It's for me. It's a very strong emotion. There's a very strong. You could see a mouth there if you want to look for it.
Yeah. Well, actually, seriously, that's
Real basic.
It's if you know that guy, well, when I'm painting someone or inspired me to create someone, I don't paint their face. I paint what I feel.
You're feeling the energy, you're feeling
Yeah.
the essence in a
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
And that's an
And
Argentinian
yeah,
activist.
and I call that
Yeah.
conflicted. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I read through his life, although he never talked about it, but just by feeling, his actions and everything that he do, that you can tell that he's trying to to have laughter in his life,
But it's
but at
hard.
the same time, it's
Well, if you see
he's-
there, that could
yeah.
almost be the shape of eyes.
yeah,
And
yeah,
they look
Mhm.
very sad.
yeah.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
then you see that it's like he's with a smile, but
There's a
not
sadness.
really. But
Mm.
sometimes I see that he looks like a clown, but
Yeah.
not really.
Mm.
He's
I-
conflicted.
Yeah, it's complete.
I can see the tongue there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's the communication side of things.
Yeah, and the man that inspired that is
Like
Yeah.
it's been a long time
yeah.
after that.
Like this. This was also inspired by a famous photographer,
Mhm.
and he's a very what you call this, Ken?
But
Gentle
also mysterious. Yeah,
and also mysterious. And this one took
deep,
me.
very deep.
Very good person. This one took me, 2 weeks to finish. This is the hardest painting that I ever did
Mhm.
because for some reason, like I will catch an energy to a person, and that energy will be staying with me for days, or sometimes just for one day.
Mhm.
But this one stays with me for 2 weeks,
Mm.
and I feel pain and everything.
Mhm. Mhm.
Which is, I think that's why I love all my paintings because I did not just, it did not just came to me. It's like it's a gift. Yeah.
It is part of you.
Yeah.
Now, thank you very much, Uncle Ken and Auntie Cheryl, for this wonderful education in art and sharing of cultures. And well, we hardly touched on the martial side of things, but I'm sure we covered it, especially in the first.
Art is politics.
With the first one of the first paintings we discussed,
Yeah.
where with the sword.
Yeah.
So on the martial side of things, it is to protect, not to take, or
It's
not to conquer.
Not to attack. It's
Not to
attack.
attack.
But I think one thing I'm looking forward to, we're on the verge in a few days' time of going to live back in the Philippines. With some of Cheryl's friends who are writers there, we're going to start in Demillet, a little writing group. And as a writer, I'm actually really looking forward to that because I'm going to be in workshopping all the time with Filipino writers. Now, although I'm nearly 66, and I've been writing since the 1970s, this to me is something that I really need to advance as a writer. To come to be able to have the privilege of being in another space with people with their own firm identity and firm beliefs, and even writing in another language and to have that interpreted. It's going to add I can feel it now. It's going to add so much more to what I'm writing now. It'll be that further influence. And so I'm looking forward to that as not only as a thing where we can get together and collaborate, and which we probably will collaborate somewhat, but from an individual point of view that causes a shift in my own writing, which is not a bad thing for a writer to go through. You need shifts every now and then, otherwise you're writing the same rubbish all the time.
You're in the one
need
rut.
those shifts,
You need to change.
Well, you do, I think my writing over the years has shifted.
Yeah. The only constant is change.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, in Cebuano, daghang salamat. In Tagalog, maraming salamat.